Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to create a basic website using XHTML and Dreamweaver CS6, basically with basic left navigation. I will follow this up with a second video that will show you how to do basically the same thing, but rather than using XHTML, we'll show you how to create a site with the top navigation using HTML5. So let's keep going. So the first thing I do when it opens up is I want to create a new site. And so you can do that over here, or I just have a habit of always going up to Site, New Site. And you want to name it something meaningful, so I'm going to call it Left Navigation Demo. And then a very important thing is you have to decide where you want to keep the files on your website. I tend to always keep them in a file called Websites, but for this demo I'm just going to create a file called Left Navigation Demo. And I always try to make the name of my folders all lowercase and avoid spaces or strange symbols. And I often will, while I'm doing this, create a folder within this, one for images and one for CSS. So once that looks good, I'm going to hit choose. I'm going to double check that that looks right. It does. So then I'm going to hit server, and you need to hit this little plus sign. So now I type in URA, and for URA I would put in SFTP, type in ura.ucdenver.edu, my URA password, I put the password in, and I hit test. And I was successful. I'm going to hit save and save. I'm going to hit OK. So just like that, I have a folder on my desktop where I'm going to store all my files that I can then use this site definition that I just created to connect to with the URA server. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit create new HTML. So in this case, I'm just using the XHTML transitional doc type, and that's fine. You'll notice in Dreamweaver you can have a design view, split view, or code view. I do most of my work in split view. You can change it under view, split vertically if you'd rather it this way. It's taken some getting used to because previous versions you weren't able to split it this way, but this is actually the way I like to do it the most. And I highly recommend working split view because you get used to seeing the code as you write it in the design view. So the first thing you want to do is give this a title. I'm going to call this Fun with Dreamweaver. And click over here on the right. You notice that when I do that, I can see over here where it was done. And notice up in the tab it also tells me that I'm working with XHTML. So I'm going to do a file save as, so that right when I start, and I'm going to make sure I save it in my left navigation folder. And I always call my first file index.html. And hit save. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a div, a container to put everything in. So I'm going to go to Insert, Layout Objects, Div. I'm going to do this as ID because I'm only going to use this once per page. Type in container, and there it is. So in this case, I'm going to delete this text here, but I got to make sure my cursor is still in between here. And I'm just going to do the same thing, but now I'm going to create one called banner. And this is kind of for what goes across the top. And you can name these things anything that makes sense to you. And so as you start working down here, you can always down here in split view apply source formatting, and it can clean up your code a little. And you'll notice that if you pull this over a little, you can start seeing that within the div container you have this other div called banner. And so what some people like to do is even add little bits of code to help them understand what this is. So for instance, I can add this comment in the banner div. I can do the same thing here, and I can actually just type this in. And some people find this helpful, especially when your site gets big, to understand when you later see this div, well, what does that actually correspond to? And in this case, it is the end of the container div, right? Makes sense. Okay, so now I could keep going down and doing the insert layout objects div tag, but I find once I get in a groove, it's easier just to type right in here. So I'm going to hit return. I'm going to type in div ID equals. I'm going to call this left nav. And then I'm going to keep going down. Now I'm going to create a new one. Once again, name it something that makes sense to you. I'm going to create one more, and this one is going to be for the footer. Okay, so now that I have this basic format set up, now what I like to do is I like to jump right in, and I start applying CSS, so I start seeing everything take shape. I'm going to actually change this and just call this banner, and so it's just a real basic guidelines for me to know what I'm working on. So now I'm going to do a file save. So once it's been saved, so now to add CSS, what I like to do is I go to Windows and I go to CSS styles, and you can always make this bigger. And I click over here on the left, and when I'm clicking in the banner, I'll look down here that I can see container and banner. Well, I actually want to add a style to the container. So I'm going to click on that. I can see it highlighted. I'm going to click this plus sign over here. So it's ID container. That looks good. So this is one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a style sheet rather than using this document only, because then I just have one place to update my CSS. And this is really the preferable way to do it. And I'm just going to call this master.css. I'm going to save it in my CSS file. Okay. So now it pops up this. And so the first thing that I want to do is I want to click on box, and I'm going to decide on a width. I'm going to do 996. There's a lot of you can do a fixed width, or you can do a page that will adjust with size. At least with educational websites, adjusting sites that adjust with size become difficult because it gets tricky to control the line length, and long line lengths can actually make it harder to read. Now there are things that you can do, especially with this new version, where you can create responsive design. They talk about it, and so rather than create like a mobile site, you'll have one site that adjusts to the screen essentially being used. And so that's kind of beyond this initial video, but that is something to think about. Right now we're just gonna start with, and it doesn't have to be 996. You can look up what are good widths. If you want 990, if you want 800, play with it. Basically, if you're not going to have a lot of content, it doesn't make sense to have a huge site, or it doesn't make sense to have a real big wide site. But right now, I'm just doing that. I'm going to click on background, and I'm just going to give it a color that's, let's do something not that obnoxious. Okay, we're going to hit apply, and you'll see it take shape. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the banner, and I'm going to actually do the same thing. So I make sure banner selected, and I click the plus sign. And here it's saying, does it want to be this specific? Well, I'm not going to have another banner, so I'm going to hit less specific. I'm going to make sure it's in my master CSS. And this background, I'm just going to change to a different color. And right now I'm just doing this so you can start seeing these different colors. Okay, so now my left nav, I'm going to do the same thing. I click on it, make sure it's selected down here. I'm going to choose less specific, make sure it's master, hit OK. And here I'm going to do a couple things. So I'm going to do a background. I'm going to change it to another color. And these are just random colors right now. Right? And now I'm going to hit on box, and this is where I'm going to control the width. I'm going to start with 150. I might change my mind. I'm going to keep it as pixels, and I'm going to make it float left. Okay, there it goes. You notice how I'm going to hit OK. When I did this, that basically body content just shifted up right next to it, which is good. So I'm going to click on body content, and in this case, you can do the math. If you know that this is 996 and this was 150, then you can do some basic math to figure out what your body content needs to be. But basically, by having a float like this, it just takes care of itself for now. Though depending when you start adding padding and margins later, that could change. Right now we're going to make sure body content selected, hit hit less specific, make sure it's master CSS. Background, we're just going to add something else. For now, we're going to do float right and hit OK. You'll notice it's being a little weird over here, so we're going to click on body content, and that's right now. Now we're going to make sure it's selected, and here, rather than a plus sign, because it already exists, we're going to hit the edit rule and put the width of 846. There you see it pop back, right? So now for footer, we're going to do one last thing for footer. Make sure that's there. And I don't remember if I created one from footer, so I can always check. You notice how I clicked over here on the CSS tab, and that's just, they're two different files. So this is my HTML file, this is my CSS. It's just showing it in a nice integrated way. But just like that, I checked my master CSS. I see that I did not add a footer. So what I'm going to do over here is, rather than use the panel like I was, I'm just going to type in footer, curly brace, and I know I want background color. You have to make sure that you have each one of these elements. Any one of these that are off, and it won't work. And so that's what's great about Dreamweaver, is that the color coding really helps you kind of do a quick scan. Alright, so I'm going to save this, and I'm going to preview it. So it doesn't look like much right now, but you can see the basic skeleton, if you will, the structure of my site is coming together already. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two things. I'm going to add some white space around all of it, and then I'm going to add some white space and padding in between. If I go back here, now when I know what I want to do, is I can simply from my left navigation, I'm going to do padding, 10 pixels. Padding, 10 pixels. I want you to see what happens with the body content. Padding, 10 pixels. Alright. So what just happened there was, because now the body content's wider than this space here, it got shifted down. And so I can quickly sit here, and it's putting 10 pixels on both sides. So let's see what happens if I subtract 20. You can take a look and you say, nope, still not there. So then, right? And there you start to see. And now if you want to see this better, you'll notice that over here we can zoom down, and we could work with that view if you want. Now I specifically, because I'm recording this, I'm trying to restrict the size so it's not enormous. But you'll start seeing how this takes shape. So for the banner image, I'm not going to actually add any padding, because I'm going to put an image in there actually to serve as my banner. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to type in some basic text. Home, I'm going to do a shift return or shift enter. Page 1, page 2, page 3. Now, these aren't really meaningful names of paging, and so you actually want to do a much better job than that. But as I'm building out my content, this is what I'll do sometimes. And I might even, pop in here and start doing this. So you start to see what things look like. So you notice how this is overlapping a little. If I actually go down to my footer down here, and I'm in my CSS now, I'm going to type in clear, both, semicolon. You'll see that just dealt with that issue where it was floating across. Now we're not going to get into all the specifics on why some of this works and doesn't right now. The goal really is to just kind of see real quick how you do a basic site. And so what I'm going to do is, and you could use another tool, but I'm going to open up Fireworks. And so in Fireworks, I'm going to create a new document, and I know in this case I'm going to make it 996. Depending on how you were, if you added padding, you might make it smaller. I'm going to just hit OK. And for the height, I'm going to actually change my canvas size to, I wasn't paying attention when I did it before, 150. Okay, so I'm going to click on my text. So let's pretend that the name of the site is Having Fun with Dreamweaver. Choose a nice big font, and typically your banner is the first thing people see. So I'm going to make this nice and big. and just play around with it. And so I'm going to just So I'm just trying to play with my colors, make it nice and big. Alright, let's pretend that this is what I wanted. So in this case, I'm going to actually play with my colors here. I'm going to actually change them. So the canvas I'm going to change here. I'm going to change this to white. You want to be very careful with contrast to make sure that things are still viewable. And you can always play around with, finding that right color scheme, whatever that right color scheme might be. So this black on this, it's probably not the best black font on a dark, so I could still, once again, play along with it. I could try to match it and then go here and go with something lighter. Right? So play around with it, have fun. But now I'm going to do a file save as, and I'm going to go into my left navigation. I'm going to go to my images. I'm going to call this banner image. No spacing, all lowercase. And there's, if finding right color schemes and things like that are hard for you, there's some great sites out there. Adobe has one where they'll go through and they can give you color schemes to follow. So in this case, I'm going to go with my banner, and I'm going to actually delete this color because it's not going to matter in just a minute. And so I'm going to go to source code HTML. I'm going to put my cursor right in that banner between those two tags. I'm actually just going to go ahead and delete that. I'm going to go insert image, click in here, banner image, and click open. It's important to always have alternate text, sometimes even a long description. For instance, if you had a more complicated image you were trying to explain. So there, that's starting to look good. And so then, down here, this is where I can start playing with my color scheme and seeing what makes sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually have no color for my footer. Let's try that. We're just going to delete that altogether. Okay, so that looks good. I'm going to go up to my banner, right? And so now you can see that the way it's set up, it's just empty with the CSS, which ultimately that's fine. That is not a bad thing per se. I'm going to actually click on body. I'm going to click on this, and this, rather than using a div, I'm going to redefine the body tag. I want to be less specific. Nope, actually, I'm going to go that back, and I'm just going to get rid of it because all I want is the body tag. I could also go down here and just say tag in it and find it that way. I'm going to hit OK. So this is where I'm going to go to the background, and I'm going to actually add a black background for the entire site. There we go. And you can start seeing things taking shape. Okay, so now for the container, I'm going to actually change this background color to white, because those initial colors were just things to start seeing everything take shape. I'm going to do right now the footer. I'm going to actually add a color after all, and I'm going to call it background color, and I'm going to actually do black. And this is because for me, the footer is often this thing at the bottom that's almost like the small print in a commercial. And so I'm going to actually put my mouse over here and do color, because this is for the font. And so then I'm going to do just a light gray font. And so we should see all of a sudden that footer coming back, right? So then we're going to do font size. We'll do 10 pixels, and you'll see it get nice and small. Okay, so now, once again, playing even more with this, I could just go ahead and make both of these the same color. So I could make my left navigation white and this background white if I wanted to. or I could play along with, this color scheme some more if I wanted to. So background color I could rather than this. We'll see what it looks like. I'm bringing my picker over to see if I got it, and then I put the semicolon, right? And then I'm going to click on this body content, and I'm going to actually get rid of that color. Okay, so just like that, I'm going to do a file save. And I could click live if I want to see what live looks like. And this is basically Dreamweaver using its own kind of browser to show you. I'm going to undo that. In this case, I'm going to preview it in Safari. It's just saying, do you want to save it again? And just like that, you can start seeing my site take shape. So the last couple things I would do right away is I would decide what font do I want basically for my site. And it could be that I know that I want a certain font on everywhere throughout the site. And if that was the case, under body, I could just type in font family. And this is where you choose, and it gives you, if you're not using this new thing called web fonts, if you're using this old way of doing it, it's basically what it does is it looks for these fonts on the user's machine. If the person has Redonda, it's going to show up for Redonda. If they don't, and it starts moving down. So I'm going to do the Arial. You got to make sure I have that closing semicolon. There you see that change. So the next thing I would play with is how to get things more aligned, how to focus on adding headings, carp, and some other very important things. So right now I'm going to do a save. I'm going to type in home, and I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to make that an H1, and I can later use CSS to change the size of that. But now I'm going to save this, and now I'm going to do a file, save as, page 1, and these would need to be named something more meaningful, as I said before. But for this example, just understanding the real basics is all you need. Now I'm going to do it save as page 2. You can't see what I'm doing off the screen here. And I like to keep changing the heading and saving it right after, because then later when I'm working on it, I clearly know which one I'm working on. And this is just a way of creating a basic site, a homepage if you will, and then just doing a save as to create different versions of it. Because you definitely, when you think about carp and principles of just being, consistency and repetition, how important they are. So now that I have this, I can highlight this and I can create my pages. So that goes to my home page, page 1. Page 2, page 3. I hit save. So the next thing I do is I would repeat those steps to make sure there are working links on each page, and then I try to preview to make sure it's working the way I think it should. Okay. Notice everything works. So right now I'm going to upload this example to your array and show you how. The next steps would be to add content, to add images throughout, and really focus on the principles of carp, specifically trying to make sure that you focus on maintaining strong alignment, improving proximity where you can, and you alignment, these top two, the home link and the heading could be aligned. So there are a lot of things you can do with carp. But for now, this is just a basic video on how to create a basic site in Dreamweaver. So now we're going to focus on uploading this to your array. First, you want to make sure you have the files panel, and I do. So I'm going to click there, and this gives me the nice big view. I'm going to hit connect, and now I can see my account here, and in this case, I'm going to click on my public HTML, and I'm going to create a new folder by right-clicking and say LeftNav Demo. I always make sure that I put things in a folder. There's no spaces, there's no caps, and just like that. So now I'm going to take these and highlight them, and I'm going to drag them to my site. So I dragged them from my local to my remote, and I made sure they were in my left nav folder. We'll try do that once more. Here, that's what I expected. Do you want to put dependent files? I do. So we're going to let it do its thing. And now we're going to test that out. And I'd go to my site, but in this case, I put it in left nav demo, I think, and say you got to get it just right. So how did I name that? Let's go look at it again. Left nav demo, no spaces. And there it is. So this is actually the same. The home page is the same as this page. Servers are just set by default to ignore that index or not require it when you just hit it this way. So just like that, we created a basic site. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how to do the basic thing, recreating this just using HTML5, taking a few, really overall just make a few things quicker. But for those of you who are interested in what HTML5 is and what it looks like, the next video will help you understand how you'll do that. Thanks.